In 1933, a woman in eastern Kentucky set a Thanksgiving table for 11 people with no turkey, no ham, and less than $2 in her pocket. Her children remembered that meal 70 years later as the best holiday dinner of their lives. Not because of what was on the table, because of what their mother did with almost nothing. Number 17 on this list fooled an entire church congregation into thinking a family could afford a roast. They could not. Number 8 was invented because a mother refused to let Christmas morning pass without something sweet on the table. And number 3, the dish that appeared at more poor family holiday tables than any turkey ever did, costs less than $4 to make right now. These 25 meals were not backup plans. They were the real holiday, the one where the woman in the kitchen performed a kind of magic that no amount of money could replace. Before we start, hit subscribe. Because the meals on this list are the reason your family survived holidays they should not have been able to celebrate at all. Let's count them down. Number 25. Mock turkey legs. When turkey cost more than a day's wages, mothers improvised. Ground pork or ground beef mixed with breadcrumbs, sage, onion, and an egg was shaped around wooden skewers or stripped corn cobs into the rough form of a drumstick, then baked until golden. Children held them by the stick and ate them like real turkey legs, and the sage and onion stuffing flavor was close enough to convince a 6-year-old that Thanksgiving had arrived on schedule. The whole tray cost less than the cheapest part of an actual turkey. Depression-era mothers shaped them the night before and let them chill so they held together during baking. Some brushed them with bacon grease to brown the surface. The children did not know they were eating ground beef. The mothers never told them. That was part of the gift. Number 24. Homemade stovetop cranberry jelly from scratch. Before the canned cylinder with the ridges became the American standard, cranberry sauce was made on the stove in about 15 minutes. A bag of fresh cranberries simmered with sugar and water until the berries burst and the liquid thickened into a deep ruby jelly that tasted sharp and bright and nothing like the can. The pectin in the cranberry skins set the whole thing firm enough to slice if you chilled it in a mold. A bag of cranberries cost almost nothing in the 1930s because they grew wild across the Northeast and upper Midwest. Families who could not afford a turkey still put cranberry jelly on the table because it was the one holiday food that cost less than the plate it sat on. It made the table look like Thanksgiving even when nothing else did. Number 23. Porcupine meatballs. Ground beef stretched with uncooked rice, shaped into balls, and simmered in canned tomato sauce for an hour until the rice puffed out through the surface like tiny quills. That was how the name happened. The rice did two things. It doubled the volume of the meat, and it absorbed the tomato sauce as it cooked, making each meatball juicy and tender all the way through. A pound of ground beef and a cup of rice produced enough meatballs to serve a table of 8 on Thanksgiving when no one could afford a bird. Children loved the way they looked. Mothers loved the way the math worked. $1.50 fed the whole family, and the meatballs tasted better than their humble ingredients had any right to. Some families still make them every Thanksgiving without knowing why. The reason is that someone's grandmother could not afford a turkey in 1934 and invented something better. Number 22. Candied sweet potatoes. Sweet potatoes pulled from the garden, boiled until tender, sliced thick, and layered in a baking dish with butter, brown sugar, and a splash of whatever was available. Sometimes orange juice, sometimes just water. Baked until the edges caramelized and the sugar turned into a sticky, dark glaze that made the whole kitchen smell like Thanksgiving. Some families topped them with marshmallows, a tradition that started in the 19-teens when marshmallow companies printed the recipe in advertisements trying to sell more product. Others left them plain, letting the natural sweetness of the potato do the work. Sweet potatoes grew in poor soil and produced enormous yields. A family garden could grow enough to last from October through January. They were the holiday side dish that poverty could not take away. and they tasted like celebration, no matter how little else was on the table. Number 21. Old hen with dumplings. Turkey was a luxury. A young roasting chicken was a splurge. But an old laying hen that had stopped producing eggs was practically free, and every farm family knew what to do with her. You simmered that tough bird in water for 3 or 4 hours, until the meat fell off the bone and the broth turned golden and rich with gelatin. Then you pulled the meat, returned the broth to a boil, and dropped in spoonfuls of biscuit dough that puffed into soft pillows floating in the chicken-flavored liquid. The dumplings absorbed the broth and turned into something between bread and cloud. A single old hen produced enough chicken and dumplings to feed a family of 10 on Thanksgiving, and the leftovers were even better the next day. The women who made this did not apologize for not having turkey. They did not need to. Nobody at the table was thinking about turkey. Number 20. Oyster stew on Christmas Eve. Before oysters became expensive, they were the cheapest protein on the eastern seaboard. A pint of shucked oysters, a quart of whole milk, butter, salt and pepper. That was Christmas Eve supper in Catholic and Protestant households from Maryland to Massachusetts for over 100 years. The oysters went into hot milk and butter and were cooked just until their edges curled, which took about 3 minutes. Overcooked and they turned to rubber. Done right and they were plump, briny and tender, floating in a creamy broth that tasted like the ocean had wandered into the kitchen. A pint of oysters cost 30 cents in the 1930s. The whole stew cost less than 50 cents and carried the weight of a tradition that went back to colonial America. Families who could afford nothing else on Christmas Eve could afford oyster stew. That was enough to make it feel like a holiday. First, a pattern break. Here is the thing about holiday meals that nobody talks about. The pressure was different for poor families. A Tuesday night dinner of beans and cornbread carried no shame because it was Tuesday. But Thanksgiving was public. Christmas was witnessed. Children talked at school about what their families ate. Neighbors noticed who had a turkey and who did not. The women who cooked holiday meals in poor households were not just feeding people. They were defending their family's dignity against a calendar that demanded abundance they did not have. Every dish on this list was an act of defiance, a refusal to let the holiday pass without something on the table that felt special. The genius was not in the recipes. The genius was in making poverty taste like plenty, at least for one day, so the children would remember the warmth and not the want. Number 19. Stuffed cabbage rolls. When there was no turkey to stuff, mothers stuffed cabbage. Ground beef or ground pork, stretched with cooked rice, seasoned with onion and garlic, wrapped in blanched cabbage leaves, and simmered in tomato sauce for an hour until the cabbage turned silky and the filling was tender. Polish families served them on Christmas Eve. Hungarian families served them on Easter. Appalachian families served them whenever the holiday required something that looked impressive on a plate without costing much. A head of cabbage, a pound of meat, and a cup of rice produced a dozen rolls that filled a baking dish and fed a family for 2 meals. They looked like gifts, each one a small package wrapped in pale green. The women who made them spent an hour rolling because the rolling was the ceremony. It was how you told your family this meal matters, even if the ingredients say otherwise. Number 18. Bread stuffing with giblets. Nobody bought stuffing in a bag. That came later. Your grandmother made it from stale bread she had been saving all week, torn into rough pieces and mixed with sautéed onion, celery, sage, salt, pepper, and the chopped giblets from whatever bird was being roasted, or from a packet of giblets bought for almost nothing at the butcher. The giblets, the heart, liver, and gizzard, gave the stuffing a depth of flavor that breadcrumbs and herbs alone could never reach. Moistened with broth and baked until the top turned crispy and the inside stayed soft, it was often the best thing on the Thanksgiving table, better than the bird it was supposed to accompany. On the years when there was no bird, the stuffing was baked in a casserole dish and served as the main course. Nobody admitted it, but nobody left the table hungry either. Number 17. Mock duck. A flank steak, spread flat and covered with a stuffing of stale breadcrumbs, onion, sage and celery, is then rolled tight, tied with kitchen string, seared in fat, and roasted in the oven for 2 hours. The result looked and carved like a small roast duck. The breadcrumb stuffing swelled inside the meat as it cooked, stretching a cheap cut into something that served 8. During the Depression, mock duck appeared on Thanksgiving tables in homes that could not afford poultry. The New York Times published the recipe as a suggestion for families looking to create a holiday centerpiece without the holiday price. Sliced at the table, with the stuffing spiraling through each round of beef, it looked like something planned rather than something improvised. That was the whole point. The women who served it called it roast with dressing. Only the butcher knew what it actually was. Number 16. Ambrosia. Canned mandarin oranges, canned pineapple, shredded coconut, miniature marshmallows, and sour cream, folded together and chilled overnight. The marshmallows softened into the cream, the coconut plumped with citrus juice. The whole thing became a cold, sweet, slightly exotic dish that showed up at every holiday table in the South and Midwest from the 1920s through the 1980s. It was technically a salad, but nobody treated it like one. Children ate it as dessert. Grandmothers served it in the good glass bowl. A family-sized batch cost $1.50 and looked like it belonged at a party, which was the entire idea. When you could not afford a fancy dessert, Ambrosia gave you something beautiful on the table for the cost of 4 canned goods and a bag of marshmallows. Number 15. Molasses popcorn balls. When Christmas candy was too expensive, mothers made popcorn balls. Popcorn popped on the stove in a heavy pot with a lid. Then it was coated in a syrup of molasses, sugar, butter, and a splash of vinegar, cooked to the hard crack stage. You buttered your hands and shaped the hot, sticky corn into balls while it was still warm enough to hold together. The molasses gave them a dark, bittersweet flavor, deeper than plain sugar syrup. Children helped with the shaping, burning their fingers and not caring, because the smell of hot molasses and popcorn was the smell of Christmas. A bag of popcorn kernels cost a dime. The molasses cost 15 cents. For a quarter, you had a dozen candy-coated popcorn balls that looked like ornaments and tasted like something a store would charge $1 a piece for. Number 14. Tomato soup spice cake. A can of condensed tomato soup stirred directly into a spice cake batter, replacing the liquid and most of the fat. The tomato did not make it taste like soup. The acidity reacted with the baking soda and produced a crumb so fine and even that professional bakers would have approved. The natural sweetness of cooked tomato amplified the brown sugar and cinnamon until the whole cake tasted like autumn distilled into a pan. Topped with cream cheese frosting, it became the holiday cake that poor families served with genuine pride. A can of soup cost a dime. The whole cake cost under 50 cents. Campbell's printed the recipe on the can because so many women were calling to ask for it. Your grandmother made it every Christmas and never told anyone what was in it because the secret was the point. The mystery was what made it special. Number 13. Creamed pearl onions. The tiniest onions from the garden or the cheapest bag at the market, peeled and simmered in a cream sauce of butter, flour and milk until they turned translucent and sweet and melted on the tongue. This was the Thanksgiving side dish that the government actually recommended. A fictional radio character called Aunt Sammy, created by the Bureau of Home Economics during the Depression era, suggested creamed onions as a replacement for the oyster stew that most families could no longer afford. The onions cost almost nothing. The cream sauce cost almost nothing. Together they looked elegant in a serving dish and tasted rich enough to hold their own beside any roasted meat. Women who served them on holidays did not think of them as a substitute. They thought of them as tradition, and after enough years, they were. Second pattern break. Here is what nobody photographs. Modern holiday content is built around a roasted turkey on a perfect table. The magazines show it. The television shows it. Social media demands it. But for most of American history, the majority of families did not have a turkey on the table. They had what they could manage: a chicken stretched with dumplings, meatballs shaped to look like drumsticks, a flank steak rolled around stuffing and carved with ceremony. The women who made those meals did not feel like failures. They felt like mothers, because feeding a family on a holiday when the money is not there is not a lesser version of the holiday. It is a harder version, and harder took more love, not less. Number 12. Vinegar pie. When there were no lemons, no fruit, and no chocolate in the house, and Christmas demanded a pie, your grandmother made one from eggs, sugar, butter, and apple cider vinegar. The vinegar mimicked citrus so convincingly that guests could not identify the main ingredient. The filling set into a smooth custard, golden on top, with a faintly tangy sweetness that made it sophisticated without meaning to be. Church supper tables held vinegar pies alongside real fruit pies, and nobody could tell which was which unless they asked. The whole pie cost less than 25 cents in the 1930s. It was the dessert that said the holiday is not cancelled just because the pantry is bare. Your grandmother served it on her best plate and never apologized. She had nothing to apologize for. Number 11. Chestnut stuffing. Before the chestnut blight wiped out American chestnut trees in the mid-20th century, chestnuts were free for anyone willing to gather them. Roasted, peeled, and crumbled into bread stuffing with onion, celery, sage, and butter, they added a sweet, earthy richness that no other nut could match. Chestnut stuffing was the Thanksgiving luxury that cost nothing because the trees were everywhere. Families sent children into the woods with baskets in late October, and the nuts were stored in cool cellars until the holiday. When the blight killed nearly 4 billion trees, it did not just change the American landscape. It changed the American holiday table. The stuffing that had been a staple for 300 years disappeared in a generation. What replaced it was never quite the same. Number 10. Baked beans, not from a can, from scratch. Dried navy beans soaked overnight, then baked low and slow for 6 or 7 hours with salt pork, molasses, mustard, and onion. The beans turned creamy inside, and the top layer crisped into a dark, sweet crust. Boston families served them on Saturday nights and holidays for 200 years. The molasses gave them a deep, almost smoky sweetness. The salt pork melted into the beans and flavored every bite without leaving any identifiable piece of meat behind. A pound of dried beans cost pennies. The salt pork cost a few cents more. The patience cost nothing. A single crock of baked beans fed a family of 8 at Christmas dinner, and nobody thought of it as a poor man's dish because it tasted too good to be pitied. When the canned version arrived, it carried the name but lost the soul. Number 9. Stack cake. The Appalachian wedding cake was not frosted, it was not decorated, it was built. Thin rounds of molasses-flavored dough baked firm like cookies, then stacked with layers of dried apple filling between each one. Pressed together under a cloth and left to sit overnight, the apple moisture softened the cake layers until the whole thing fused into a dense, spiced, fruit-layered structure that sliced clean and tasted like 6 months of preserved summer. At weddings, each guest brought a layer. The more layers, the more popular the bride. At Christmas, mothers baked the layers themselves and assembled the cake on Christmas Eve. A 12-layer stack cake cost almost nothing because dried apples were free from the fall harvest and flour and molasses were the cheapest things in the pantry. It kept for 2 weeks without refrigeration. It got better with every passing day. Number 8. Sugar cream pie. No fruit, no chocolate, no nuts. Just cream, sugar, butter, flour, and vanilla, stirred together and poured into a pie shell. then baked until the surface crackled and the filling set into something between custard and candy. Indiana's state pie, the Hoosier cream pie. Amish bakers made it because the ingredients were always in the house and the technique was forgiving enough that even a distracted cook could pull it off. The top formed a thin brown skin that shattered at the touch of a spoon. Beneath it, the filling was silky and impossibly sweet, and it tasted like a holiday even in the middle of July. A whole pie cost less than 30 cents to make during the Depression. It was the pie that appeared on Christmas tables in households that could not afford pecan, pumpkin, or mincemeat. It asked for nothing and delivered everything. Number 7. Pork roast with apples. For families who could not afford a turkey or a ham, a pork shoulder was the holiday roast. Seasoned with salt, pepper, and sage, it was cooked low for 4 or 5 hours until the fat rendered and the meat fell apart at the touch of a fork. Apples from the cellar, quartered, were tucked around the roast in the last hour, where they softened and caramelized in the pork drippings, turning sweet and savory at the same time. The gravy made from the pan drippings was dark and rich and tasted like every good thing about a cold-weather kitchen. A pork shoulder cost a fraction of what a turkey cost, and it fed just as many people with more flavor and less fuss. Families who served it on Thanksgiving did not think of it as a substitute. They thought of it as the way their mother had always done it, which made it tradition, which made it right. Number 6. Persimmon pudding. In southern Indiana and across the lower Midwest, wild persimmons ripened after the first frost and dropped from the trees for anyone willing to collect them. Mashed into a pulp and stirred into a batter of eggs, sugar, flour, milk, and spices. The mixture was baked into a dense, custardy pudding that tasted like caramel, like autumn, and like something you could not quite name. The pudding was dark and heavy, served warm with whipped cream, or cold the next morning with coffee. Persimmon pudding showed up on Thanksgiving and Christmas tables across rural Indiana, Kentucky, and southern Illinois as the holiday dessert that cost nothing because the main ingredient grew wild on the roadside. Families who made it considered store-bought pumpkin pie an inferior substitute. They were not wrong. Number 5. Gelatin mold salad. Before it became a joke, gelatin salad was the holiday side dish that solved a real problem. How do you make a table look abundant when the food budget does not allow abundance? A box of flavored gelatin, a can of fruit cocktail, some chopped celery or nuts, and a decorative mold. Chilled overnight, the salad emerged shimmering and jewel-toned, looking like something from a magazine cover. The gelatin held the fruit in suspension, each piece visible through the trembling surface, like specimens in amber. Lime gelatin with pear halves was a classic. Cherry with fruit cocktail was another. Families placed the mold at the center of the Thanksgiving table, where it caught the light and made everything around it look more festive. A single box of gelatin cost a nickel. The impression it created was worth considerably more. Number 4. Depression-era fruitcake. Not the brick wrapped in cellophane that became a national punchline. The real one. Raisins, water, sugar, and lard boiled together on the stove until the kitchen smelled like Christmas. Cooled and stirred into flour with baking soda and whatever spices the pantry held, cinnamon and cloves and a pinch of nutmeg. Baked until dark and dense and fragrant. No eggs, no butter, no candied fruit. The boiled raisins turned into soft, caramelized pockets throughout the crumb. The cake kept for weeks wrapped in foil, and it genuinely improved with age as the spices mellowed. Mothers baked it the first week of December and did not cut it until Christmas Day. A whole loaf cost 40 cents. It was the one Christmas tradition that poverty could not touch because poverty had invented it. Number 3. Ham hock and bean soup with cornbread. This was the meal, the one that appeared on more poor family holiday tables than turkey, ham, or roast beef combined. A ham hock that cost less than $1 simmered all day with dried beans until the broth turned thick and smoky and the beans melted into it. Cornbread baked in a cast iron skillet until the bottom crisped dark and the top cracked golden. You broke the cornbread into the soup and ate it with a spoon. A pot of ham and beans with a skillet of cornbread cost about $3 and fed a family of 10 on Thanksgiving, Christmas, or Easter without apology. Families across the South, the Ozarks, and the Appalachian Highlands ate this on every holiday for 100 years. It was not a replacement for the real thing. It was the real thing. Number 2. Sweet potato pie. Sweet potato pie, a Southern holiday staple. The pie existed because pecan pie was too expensive and pumpkin was not always available. Boiled sweet potatoes were mashed smooth with butter, sugar, eggs, milk, cinnamon, and nutmeg poured into a pie shell and baked until the filling set and the surface darkened slightly. The flavor was deeper and richer than pumpkin pie, the natural sugar in the sweet potato giving it a caramel quality that pumpkin could not match. Black families across the South served sweet potato pie at Thanksgiving and Christmas for generations. The tradition stretched back through slavery and across the Atlantic. The sweet potatoes came from the garden. The cost was almost nothing. The pie was the centerpiece of the holiday table, and it earned that position not by being expensive, but by being extraordinary. A family that had sweet potato pie on the table at Christmas had Christmas. Nothing else was required. Number 1. A table set with everything you had. The most important holiday meal poor families made was not a single dish. It was the act of putting everything together. The beans and the cornbread and the candied sweet potatoes, the cranberry jelly, the vinegar pie, and the meatballs shaped like drumsticks. Separately, each dish said we could not afford much. Together, crowded onto a table covered with the good cloth, passed between hands that had worked all day to make them, they said something else entirely. They said this family is still here. They said this table is full. They said the holiday is real because we decided it was real, not because we bought enough to prove it. The women who made those tables did not follow a menu. They followed a principle. You use what you have. You waste nothing. You set every plate and you sit down together because the meal is not the food. The meal is the people eating it. Those are your 25 meals. Some of them cost $1, some cost less. All of them fed more people than their ingredients should have been able to reach, and every one of them tasted like a holiday to the families who made them. Pick one this season. Make the stack cake and let it sit overnight. Simmer a pot of beans with a ham hock and bake cornbread in cast iron. Shape meatballs around rice and watch your children eat them like drumsticks. Tell me in the comments which one your family made. Tell me which one you did not know had a name, because these meals were never about what was missing from the table. They were about who was sitting at it, and that has always been enough.